respected venerables, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, a very good morning to you all. On behalf of the Academy of Sinology, a very warm welcome to Lampeter. My name is Kelly, and this is Hannah, and it's a real honour to be here today. The topic of our talk is ancestral remembrance, filiality and respectfulness. Let me begin with ancestral remembrance. The ancestral remembrance ceremony is a fine tradition of China dating back to its earliest times. That's about 5,000 years ago, based on the formal records. These traditional ceremonies were revived in Hong Kong in 2012, and since then have taken place around the world, in Malaysia, in Singapore, in mainland China, and we've got some photos from Taiwan, Hong Kong, Australia, London, and even at UNESCO's headquarters in Paris.
Yes, it was incredible. There are 195 member states of UNESCO. Can you imagine? There were representatives from all over the world commemorating their country's ancestors. That is virtually all of the world's ancestors.
Well, this afternoon, Hannah, we'll be commemorating all of our ancestors from every country and every ethnicity right there on those memorial tablets.
You mean the tablets on the backdrop behind us?
They're behind the screen? Absolutely. We're looking at all the world's families on those tablets.
Looks like the whole world is really one big family.
That's right. As the words ancestral remembrance suggests, the ceremony is an opportunity to reflect on the legacy of our ancestors, those gone before us, to celebrate their contributions, to reflect and learn from that, and to live in honour of all that they've taught us, so that we too can hopefully be role models for generations to come. It's like a circle of life.
The other part of our title today is filiality and respectfulness. Filiality refers to serving our parents, and respectfulness is about serving our teachers. Those two words represent the greatest legacy from the perspective of traditional Chinese culture, and we'd like to share with you why and how that is.
First, filiality. The whole point of the ancestral remembrance ceremony can be encapsulated in a single Chinese character, and that's the character for filiality. In English, it's often translated as filial piety, which basically means to love and care for parents. As they say, a picture tells 1,000 words, so let's take a closer look. The structure of a Chinese character helps us to understand its meaning. At the top, we have an abbreviated form of the character for old, and at the bottom, we find the character for child. Put together, it's like a picture of a child supporting an elderly person, such as their parents. And that's why it's been translated to mean to love and care for parents. Now, you might be wondering, what about grandparents or great-grandparents?
There is a deeper meaning. The top represents all the older generations, our grandparents, our ancestors, all the world's ancestors. The child represents the younger generation, our generations, and those to come. If you think about it, there are infinite past generations and infinite generations to come. No beginning and no end. Put together, the character literally shows us that we are connected to those of the past and the future. How? The generations of the past wanted to pass on their wisdom and experiences, so people like us could learn from them and not repeat the same mistakes. And we also have a responsibility to our children and our children's children to make the world a better place. You see, we are all connected.
The meaning of filiality is profound. Filiality is the basis of all virtue, of all goodness. Now, if all of our virtues could be represented in a tree, filiality would be its roots, and no less vital to a happy and healthy life.
But the great thing is, this is not just a Chinese character. It's a timeless and universal value. That's why in many parts of the world, not just in Asia, filiality remains the fountainhead of traditional culture and the wisdom of the East. We can all relate because we all have parents and we all know people younger than us. This one character shows us that everyone is ever connected in time and space.
And that's the beautiful meaning of filiality. It's the very reason why ancestral remembrance is so important. Now, how do we begin to understand this amazing concept? Let's take a look at this video.
Just give me 1 second. Thank
Sure.
you. Sorry. Uh-huh. Hey. Hi. 2 minutes. Thank you. Hi, good afternoon. Sorry about that.
Oi.
Hi, nice
Hi.
to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well. Have you ever done one of these interviews over the camera before?
No.
Well, let me tell you a little bit about the job to get started with. It's not just a job, it's sort of probably the most important job. The title that we have going right now is Director of Operations, but it's really kind of so much more than that. Responsibilities and requirements are really quite extensive. First category for the requirements would be mobility. This job requires that you must be able to work standing up most or really all of the time, constantly on your feet, constantly bending over, constantly exerting yourself, a high level of stamina.
Okay.
That's a lot. For how many hours?
135 hours to unlimited hours a week. It's basically 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
I'm sure you'll have a chance from time to time to maybe just sit down here and there, yeah?
You mean like a break?
Yeah.
No, there are no breaks available.
Is that even legal?
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like no lunch.
You can have
or-
lunch, but only when the associate is done eating their lunch.
I think that's a little intense.
No.
Not possible.
That's crazy.
Now, this position requires excellent negotiation and interpersonal skill. We're really looking for someone that might have a degree in medicine, in finance, and the culinary arts. You must be able to wear several hats. Associate needs constant attention. Sometimes they have to stay up with an associate throughout the night. Being able to work in a chaotic environment, if you had a life, we'd ask you to sort of give that life up. No vacations. In fact, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, and holidays, the workload is going to go up, and we demand that with a happy disposition.
That's almost cruel. That's almost a very, very sick, twisted joke.
Worry about when there's time to sleep or...
Oh, no time to sleep.
Yeah, all-encompassing almost.
That's exactly right.
365 days a year?
Yes.
No, that's inhumane.
That's very insane.
The meaningful connections that you make and the feeling that you get from really helping your associate are immeasurable. Also, let's cover the salary. The position is going to pay absolutely nothing.
Excuse me?
No. Nobody's doing that for free.
Yeah,
You're
pro
crazy.
bono, completely for free.
No.
What if I told you there's someone that actually currently holds this position right now? Billions of people, actually.
Who?
Moms.
Yeah.
Yeah. Moms.
That's awesome.
Oh.
And they meet every requirement, don't
wow.
Oh my god. Moms are the best!
Yeah, there's no pay. They're 24 hours. They're always there.
Now I'm thinking about my mom.
they? Yeah, and what are you thinking about her?
I'm thinking about all those nights and everything.
Thank you so much for everything you do. I know it doesn't seem like I appreciate all of it, but I definitely do.
So, Mom, I want to say thank you for everything that you've done. I love you very much. You've been there through thick and thin. My mom is just awesome. She's awesome.
Now, that is unconditional love.
Absolutely. You could say that our parents were the first to show us what unconditional love really means. Each of us comes into this world with nothing at all. But our parents love us enough to care for us when we need it the most. They even go without sleep, as new parents do, put up with us in sickness and before toilet training.
The Buddha once said, "The kindness of our parents is deeply profound. Their care and devotion never cease. From the moment our parents awake, their thoughts are with their children." Our parents think of us constantly, but how often do we think of them?
Confucius once said, "We should be aware of how old our parents are. On the one hand, we rejoice for their health. On the other hand, we become anxious. Why? We often forget that our parents are growing older with each day, and that our time with them is limited. There is a famous saying, 'Love your parents and treat them with care, for you will only know their value when you see their empty chair.'"
We all have parents, but perhaps we may never know the selfless and unconditional love of a parent, its breadth and depth, the no mountain high enough, no river wide enough kind of love, until we become a parent ourselves.
What the character for filiality teaches us is that we are one with our parents, and by extension, we are one with the past and future generations. It teaches us to love others unconditionally. Now, let's take a look at another video.
Τι είναι αυτό?
Ένα σπουργίτη.
Τι είναι αυτό?
Μόλις τώρα στο πατέρα, σπουργίτη είναι.
Τι είναι αυτό?
Ένα σπουργίτη είναι, πατέρα. Ένα σπουργίτη. Σπου-γι-τι.
Τι είναι αυτό?
Γιατί το κάνεις αυτό το πράγμα, μπορείς να μου πεις? Τόσες φορές σου είπα, είναι ένα σπουργίτη. Δεν το καταλαβαίνεις. Πού πας?
Δυνατά.
Σήμερα ο μικρός μου γιος που πριν λίγες μέρες έκλεισε τα 3 καθόταν μαζί μου έξω στο πάρκο όταν ένας σπουργίτη ήρθε και κάθισε απέναντί μας. Ο γιος μου με ρώτησε 21 φορές τι ήταν αυτό και του απάντησα και τις 21 φορές ότι ήταν ένα σπουργίτη. Τον αγκάλιασα τρυφερά και τις 21 φορές που μου έκανε την ίδια ερώτηση, ξανά και ξανά, χωρίς να εκνευριστώ, νιώθοντας στοργή για το αθώο μου αγοράκι.
Whenever I see that video, I always feel really moved. It doesn't matter where you come from. Loving our parents, reciprocating their kindness brings out the innate virtue in all of us. Our parents are the first people we know, and during the formative years of infancy and childhood, we tend to interact most with our parents at home. As such, our parents can influence how we learn and relate to everyone and everything for the rest of our life. You could say parents are tasked by nature to play leading roles in educating children in the way of being a human being. By learning to love unconditionally from our parents, reciprocating their kindness, and developing the heart to love all beings in the same way, even those we disagree with, we will have harmony.
Case in point is Ming Ziqian, one of Confucius's famous students. He lived from 536 BC to 487 BC. When Ming Ziqian was very young, his mother died and his father remarried. Unfortunately, his stepmother was very unkind to him. You see, in the winter, she would clothe her own sons with warm clothes, but clothed him in garments made of rushes, which doesn't insulate at all. One time, he was driving the carriage for his father through the snow, and he became so cold he couldn't keep hold of the reins. When his father discovered how his second wife had been treating their son, he was determined to divorce her. But Ming Ziqian pleaded with his father. He said, "If she remains, only one child suffers. But if she leaves, all sons will be destitute." You see, even though Ming Ziqian was suffering from cold and hunger, he was still concerned about his stepbrothers and the family as a whole. And this moved his stepmother, who changed her ways. Confucius has praised Ming Ziqian's filiality in the Analects, and his model example remains well known to this day.
That is the power of filiality, why it is at the heart of all virtues, and why it is regarded as the key to harmony and peace.
The ancient sages saw the natural love between parent and child as something really important, and they wanted to come up with a way to make it last. What they came up with was education. Now, traditional Chinese culture is a fusion of Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism, as depicted in the artwork we can see. Now, let's have a show of hands. Hands up if you can see one person, 2 people, or 3. We can all be right in this question. In the center is the Buddha, representing Buddhism. And at the left is Lao Tzu with the Taoist cap. And on the right is Confucius with the Confucian cap in blue. So all 3 schools of thought, Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism, highlight filiality. Now, by education, I mean learning about moral virtue, developing our character, realizing the wisdom from within to live with love for all. And education not only happens in the classrooms, but through the performing arts, music, craft, literature, all aspects of culture.
And that's what these ceremonies are about.
No doubt we'll hear more about that coming up with the next presentation from Ming Yan and Bo Han. And we'll feel it this afternoon. The whole ceremony, from the way that the gowns, the beating of the drum, the way each part of the service is announced, it inspires a feeling of
respect?
Yes, respect and gratitude for our ancestors. You see, without our ancestors, we wouldn't be here. Well, I'm not actually on stage holding the offerings. I do still feel as if I'm in the presence of my forefathers. And so these ceremonies help us to remember where we come from. Traditionally performed 3 to 4 times a year, these ceremonies also remind us to keep a sincerity and respectfulness at heart. And the sincerity and respectfulness is helpful to every aspect of life.
Every aspect?
Every part of our life. You see, as children, we practice filiality by loving and respecting our parents and elders in the family. And as we grow up, the practice of filiality, thus honouring elders, extends to all our teachers throughout our life.
Well, this might be a silly question, but these days we pay for our education at school. So our teachers have to teach us. In the workplace, employers will offer training so that we've got the know-how and experience to do the job. Some might say, isn't this respectfulness a little outdated?
You see, by teacher, we don't just mean the ones at school or at work. Confucius once said, "When walking along with two others, I always find a teacher among them. I seek to emulate the good examples, and the bad examples help me to reflect on what I need to improve on."
Teachers are really all around us. They help us develop our character and fulfill our potential. They help us find our way in life. They inspire us to keep going when we are down. They often teach not only by what they say, but how they live.
The truth is, if we don't respect our teachers, we don't learn anything. Our teachers are dedicated to imparting their knowledge and experience. As students, if we are sincere and respectful, we'll be able to fully understand and benefit. As the Buddhist great master Yin Guang once said, if we have 10% of sincerity and respectfulness, we benefit by 10%. With 100% of sincerity and respectfulness, we benefit by 100%.
So what we gain is directly proportionate to the extent of our respectfulness?
That's right. If we're not sincere about our own learning, no matter how much the teacher wants to pass on their knowledge, no matter how they try to get through to us, we gain nothing. Now, good teachers are pretty difficult to find, but they will tell you that sincere students are rarer still. When a teacher meets a sincere and respectful student, they will spare no effort in helping them fulfill their potential.
You know what, Kelly? This reminds me of Venerable Master Chin Kong's story. As you may know, Venerable Master is a world leader in interfaith and intercultural harmony. He is also a humanitarian. Venerable Master often talks of how he came to study under one of the greatest Chinese philosophers, Professor Dong Meifang. He respectfully wrote a letter to the professor, asking for permission to sit in on his university lectures, because at the time he could not afford the tuition fees. Despite not having completed high school due to the Sino-Japanese War, he persevered with self-study and continued reading the classics. With the letter to the professor, he attached an essay on his personal study. The essay was a sincere reflection of his learning from the wisdom of the ancient sages. The professor was so impressed with his depth of understanding, he said that even the university graduates could not write at that level. Why is that? Because the students are not sincere in discovering wisdom. They just attend classes to get a degree, as a qualification to get a job. So even if the lecturers wanted to teach more, it was difficult. So in the end, the professor taught Venerable Master in his own home every weekend for 2 hours and for free.
Why would a teacher teach for free? Because they're moved to teach by the student's sincerity to learn. Sincerity and respectfulness directly determine how much we gain out of our learning. The same attitude applies in day-to-day life, and we should have the same respectfulness towards all elders, not just our parents or the teachers who've taught us.
So practicing filiality extends to respecting our teachers. But I think there's more to this. This filiality reminds me of the saying, we ignore our elders' teachings at our own peril. By gleaning the wisdom from the past, we gain insight, decades or even centuries into the future. Just as Isaac Newton once said, "If I have seen further, It is by standing on the shoulders of giants. By learning from our forefathers, from the writings that left to the world, we can benefit from the giant vision and wisdom of ancient sages and realize harmony and happiness. So, studying the timeless teachings, putting them into practice, sharing them is also an important part of filiality. This ensures that the teachings can be passed on from one generation to another.
And that's so true. Without sincerity and respectfulness, we gain no benefit from learning the sacred texts.
The whole point of learning and practicing is to attain peace and harmony.
Like Confucius once said in the very first line of his Analects, learning and living the sage teachings, is there anything that brings greater joy?
And we are not talking about rote learning, but those light bulb moments, those times when things just make sense. Learning involves studying extensively, asking questions, and thinking deeply. Living is about putting into practice, actually living out what we learned. And that's what brings out inner happiness. Learning and living the sage teachings, is there anything that brings greater joy? That's what Confucius really meant.
So, what do you mean by the sage teachings, Hannah?
There's an amazing wealth of wisdom in the complete library of 4 branches of literature.
Oh, I remember. We have a short video of the complete library. Let's take a look. The video gives us a sense of the extensiveness of the complete library. The whole collection fills up the writer room in the Founders Library on campus.
It's the largest collection of writings and books in the whole history of China. It was commissioned by Emperor Qianlong in 1772. It brought together the greatest minds to compile the most important books, spanning a period of over 2,000 years, from before China's first imperial dynasty to its last. The first copy alone took 10 years to complete. Qianlong ordered 6 more copies. It was all handwritten, of course, so producing 6 more copies was no mean feat. And they located the 7 copies in different places to spread the risk of loss and damage.
Before you go on, Hannah, may I ask why it's called the Complete Library?
It is called complete because it covers every field of knowledge comprehensively, from philosophy, literature, and mathematics, science, and much more, all complete with commentaries and explanations. The complete library includes European works too, by the likes of Italians Matteo Ricci and Niccolò Longobardo, the German Johann Adam Skoll von Bell, and the Flemish Ferdinand Verbiest. It's truly a treasure trove that embraces diversity of culture.
The 4 branches describes the 4 traditional categories of writings: the classical works, the historical works, the philosophical works, and the literary works. The complete library is made up of over 3,500 texts, and I've heard that it's impossible for a person to read in one lifetime.
Well, the good news is there is an abridged version.
That is good news.
The abridged version is called The Selections from the Four Branches of Literature. It was produced for the emperor's ease of reference. So only 2 sets of these selections were ever made. Now, after World War II, only 3.5 copies of the original complete library remained.
You're saying that out of the 7 original sets of the complete library, only 3.5 remain?
Yes, not surprisingly, many were alarmed at the risk of losing such a world treasure. Concerned with the need to preserve this cultural heritage, Venerable Master sponsored a reprint of 112 copies of the complete library, 330 copies of the selections from the 4 branches of literature. And he has donated them to all 4 corners of the world, to major universities, national libraries, and cultural institutes, for the benefit of learners today, and for safekeeping for generations to come.
Every time I hear about this, I feel really moved. It means that even if there is some large-scale disaster, there should be enough copies around to survive in some part of the world. It's not just about sharing these collections of the wisdom for the here and now. Venerable Master is also thinking long-term, making sure that these timeless collections of wisdom remains for years to come, so that future generations can also learn and benefit by leading a happy and healthy life.
We have the books now, but just as important as the books is having the people to read them. People able to read, teach, and translate these great collections so that the wisdom is shared. That is the mission of the Academy of Sinology here, to train young people to be fluent in classical Chinese. And to undertake this work, this is the first academy of its kind in the UK.
Lots of people are already learning Chinese these days, but why is it necessary to be fluent in classical Chinese?
These records of wisdom, like the complete library, have survived over hundreds of years and remain accessible to this day because they are written in classical Chinese using the Chinese characters, which transcend time and space. In fact, the Swedish sinologist Bernard Colgren, have you heard of him before?
Yes, Bernard Colgren is a renowned expert on the Chinese language, known right around the world.
He was a polylinguist. He understood all the Nordic, Greek, and Slavonic languages, and it was because of his understanding of other language systems that he could really identify the strengths of the Chinese language. And this is what he said. Not only were the Chinese able, thanks to this excellent medium, they were to keep contact with each other. In spite of their various dialects, they were also capable of communicating intimately with the Chinese of past age, in a way that we can hardly realize. Literary Chinese has been essentially the same throughout the ages, for several thousand years. So after mastering the language, a poem could be written at the time of Christ. 1,000 years later, or yesterday, it would be just as comprehensible and enjoyable. In other countries, where the written language follows the evolution of the spoken, a practically new literary language evolves in the course of a few hundred years. An ordinary English speaker of today can hardly go further back than 3 or 4 centuries. In their own literature, the earliest periods can only be appreciated after special philological study. However, to the Chinese, the literature of millennia remains ever accessible due to the nature of the literary language. I did a bit of research after reading about this. Have you heard of Beowulf?
That's Old English, isn't it?
That's right. Beowulf is the oldest surviving long poem in English. It is written in Old English, written in roughly the 9th century CE. If anyone looked at it today, you can see the letters of the alphabet, but it's otherwise unreadable.
Yes, it's really difficult to make out the words.
But we can still read and understand the Chinese writings from 2,000 years ago. For example, the Analects are the words of Confucius from the 5th century BCE, as recorded by his students.
And it is just as if Confucius is directly talking to us or writing to us.
The way we write classical Chinese today and the way it was written 2,000 years ago by the great thinkers in China are almost the same. So we can understand the classics.
Now, the British historian and philosopher of history, Professor Arnold Toynbee, had a great analogy. He said, if a 5th century BC Greek could come back to life, go to Greece and try to talk to a modern-day Greek person, he would not be understood. They would both be speaking Greek, but the sounds, the grammar, and the vocabulary of the Greek language have changed such that they would not understand each other. But if a 5th century BC Chinese person, say Confucius, were to come back to life and were to meet a Chinese person today, well, if they talked, they would be no better than the two Greeks. But the two could write to each other because the same characters, arranged in the same order, have the same meaning to Confucius as to the Chinese today. So they would be able to communicate.
The British scientist and sinologist Dr. Joseph Needham at Cambridge described this literary language, classical Chinese, as unequaled to any other invented instrument of human communication. Classical Chinese is an ideal medium for preserving the wisdom of our traditional culture. For example, the Buddhist canon. Most people have heard of the Journey to the West. It is based on a true story. The great master Xuanzang actually traveled to India and brought scriptures back to China, where he translated the Sanskrit into classical Chinese for preservation. While Sanskrit is incomprehensible to most today, we can still read classical Chinese. It's the same with the complete library.
Sounds like some fantastic reading, but an awful lot of books. Well, in a nutshell, all of the teachings boil down to 12 timeless and universal virtues, and they are filiality, fraternity, loyalty, trustworthiness, courtesy, righteousness, integrity, shamefulness, benevolence, love, harmony, and peace. Regardless of where we come from, I think we can all relate to these virtues, and they're fundamental to human life.
Let's take a look at two virtues. This is the character for trustworthiness. In this character, on the left is person. Why is it the character for person? We can see how the character for person, 人, looks just like a person bowing with hands together in front as a courteous greeting. It also represents a position of humility and respectfulness. Why? In this character, we find a gentle reminder of the eternal importance of being humble and respectful in all that we do. On the right is the character for speech. Putting the two characters together, person plus speech, means a person that can stand by their words. They are honest, they can walk the talk, and keep a promise. This is the character for trustworthiness.
Our forefathers regarded the virtue of trust as fundamental to being a good person. If there is no trust, it's difficult to accomplish anything. If we don't trust in the sage teachings, if we don't have faith in our forefathers, then we wouldn't be able to benefit. So this trustworthiness is very important.
Let's take a look at another character. This is the character for benevolence. On the left is the character for person, and on the right is the character for the number 2. That's 2 people like myself and others. When we think of ourselves, we must think of others. Why? We are all one entity. This value reminds us to keep a sincere and compassionate heart, to put others before ourselves. Just as the Bible says, love your neighbor as yourself.
And it's a core teaching of Confucianism, Buddhism, Taoism too. In fact, the world's major religions share so many of the same core teachings. In the East, we have sage teachings, and in the West, the religions provided this moral compass. Treating others as we would wish to be treated is a universal virtue indeed, and at its utmost, this benevolence involves compassion and unconditional love for all.
But where do we start?
From loving our family members, from our parents, our spouse, partner, and children, and then expands to loving all people, just as boundless as the sky above and the earth below. We can see the sky shelters all, and the earth accommodates everyone and everything. And as human beings, we too can emulate the selflessness of nature.
If you wanted to summarize it further, all these values are encapsulated in the first, filiality, or serving our parents. Traditional culture is about sustaining and translating the naturally unconditional love between parent and child that we all experience at the beginning of life, extending it through to all of our interpersonal relationships, as with our spouse, with people who are older or younger than us, with our leaders and subordinates, and with friends.
Ancestral remembrance helps us to remember where we come from, and this inspires us to live in honor of those gone before us. We do so in 2 ways. By serving our teachers, always keeping sincerity and respectfulness at heart to learn from the people around us, and especially the sage teachings, the wisdom of the ancient sages, and then sharing what we learn with others so that the wisdom of the past can continue to benefit the present. So, serving our teachers is one way.
And we also honor our ancestors by serving our parents, living out the spirit of unconditional love, doing our best at home, at work, and in the community, making our family proud.
I think this final slide sums up how we feel in front of the memorial tablets of our ancestors. As a voice once put it so beautifully,
I am strong when I am on your shoulders. You raise me up to more than I can be.
the wisdom of our elders has given us so much, and that's what we're celebrating here today. Thank you very much.
迪奥肯保养，阿弥陀佛。
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and dear friends,
嘉宾们，
a very good morning to you
大
all.
家好。
My name is Ming Yan,
我叫
and
明
this is
言，
my partner, Bo Han. It
这
is
是博
our
涵。
great honor and privilege to be with you here
我们非常
today.
荣幸能够在此
We
为大
just
家
heard
分
an
享我们学习
insightful
心得。
speech given by Kelly and
刚才
Hannah
听到
on
凯
filiality
丽
and
和玉
respectfulness.
涵的这个讲
For the
座
next hour,
是非常的激动
Bo
人心。
Han and
那么
I
那
will
么
be
接下来
talking
呢
to，you
我和
about
博
how
涵
the
跟
education
大
of
家
rites
介绍
and music can help
礼
us
和
achieve
乐
harmony
的
from a
对
Confucian
和谐的
perspective.
重要性。
Ming Yan, I am very looking
明艳
forward
姐
to
我
attending the
每次参
Ancestral
加
Remenbrance
祭祖
service
大典
this
都
afternoon.
深深的
I
被
can
震
still
撼。
vividly remember the
那么
sense
震
of
撼大典的仪
solemnity
式，让我
and
对祖
reverence
先的这
the
种
service
恭
brought
敬
me
心
last
油
year.
然而生。
It really inspired me to pay homage
主
to
祭
our
官和陪祭
ancestors.
的服装非常
The
的庄
music
严，
played was solemn,
祖祭
and
的
the
祭
dignified
祖的音乐
attire
也非
the
常
leading
的
attendants
肃
wore
穆。
really left an impression on me.
I feel the same way, Bo Han.
啊，
But
我
the
也是这样的
attire
想。
and music are just part of the formality. There's
然后
more
呢，
profound
服装和
meaning
音乐
behind
只
the
是祭祖
ceremony,
的仪式，
and that is the
那么仪式的
education
背后
of
还有更
rites
加
and
深刻的
music,
内涵，
a
那也
long-standing
就是中
culture
国
passed
先
down
祖
from
历来相
generation
传
to
的礼
generation
乐
from
文明。
ancient times.
The education of rites and music was a
礼乐文
significant
明是
component
中
of
国
the
古代文
ancient
明的主
Chinese
要组成部
civilization,
分。那早
where
在
rites
西周
consist
时候
of
呢，
rituals and
周公
propriety
就治理
as
作
early
乐，
as the
形成
Western
颇
Zhou
为完
dynasty,
善的礼乐
almost
制度。
3,000 years ago. The Duke of Zhou established a rather complete system
那
of
是
rites
3000
and
多年前
music.
了。那么礼乐
The
文
essence
明
of this
实质
system
是
was to
道德
promote
伦
and
理的教
teach
化，
ethics
目
and
的
morals
是用
with the
来
purpose
维
of
护
maintaining the
社
harmony
会
of
秩序上
humanity.
的人
Yes.
伦和谐。
In the early Western Zhou period,
是
King
的，
Chen
在
and
西周
King
初
Kang
期，周
greatly
成王和周
venerated
康王
virtues and
崇德尊
propriety.
礼，推
Under their
行礼
collective
乐教
rulership,
化，因此
the
有了
education of
成
rites
康
and
盛
music
世。
was extensively
那社会
promoted.
安定，
People at the
百
time
姓和睦，
witnessed the
那一切
expansion of
刑罚
peace
放置
and
一边，
prosperity
40
throughout
多
the
年都没有
land.
使用了。
This period
那么
is known
反
as the
观春秋
Golden
时期
Age
啊
of the，Zhou
礼崩
dynasty.
乐坏，诸侯
Recorded
诸侯之
history
间呢，他
showed that
征战不
punishments
已，
for
而
crime were
周
not
天子已
needed
经
or
无力
applied
阻止
for
了。
almost 40 years.
那么
On
道
the
德伦
contrary,
理日渐
during the
丧失，
spring and
世
autumn
风日下
period,
人心不
the
古的现
teachings
象
of rites and
也
music
日益
were
加
gradually
深。
abandoned, as the vassal leaders thought this teaching of peaceful coexistence would impose negative effects on their ambition to expand their territory. The various states fought against each other for more land and power. At the time, moral and ethical standards declined, and the social atmosphere began to deteriorate. There was evident degeneration in public morality.
Historians believe that this was mainly
那么
due
历
to
史
the
学家
loss
呢认
of the
为，这是因
education
为
of music
礼
and
教
rites.
礼乐教化
The
的遗
rules of
失。
propriety were instituted to regulate people's
那么礼
conduct
是用来
in a way
节
to
制人
foster
心的
certain，
如果没有
desirable
礼的
moral
约
traits.
束，人们的欲望
Without the
就会无
constraints
限的
of
膨胀。
propriety, social order and harmony will be challenged. Likewise,
乐
music
是
was
用来
used to
调和
induce
人
the
心的
harmony,。to induce
如
a
果
sense of
乐
harmony
不
in
够
people.
平和庄重
If，the input
就
of
会
music
引起
is not
人的各
peaceful
种
and
情绪。
solemn, the emotion of people will be influenced accordingly. When
那当
becomes
人
a
们
slave
成
to
为
his
欲望和
desire and
情绪的奴隶
emotions
呢，
and
就
is
会失去
negligent
理智。
of moral standards,
无论是礼
then
还
he
是
is
乐，
bound
没有
to
它
become
就会
self-centered
难
and
以
irrational.
维持社会秩序，
Without the
就无
teachings
法
of
凝
rites
聚
or
人
music,
心。
it would have been difficult to maintain the social order and community cohesion.
Yes, this education played a vital role
礼乐教化
in
中的
bringing
礼
social
和
harmony
乐
in ancient China.
要具备
In
节
ancient
制人
times,
心、和
only
谐
the
人
sage
心的作用
kings,，
这
such
要求
as
是
the
非
Duke
常
of
高的。
Zhou,
那
had
上
the
古时期，
capacity and knowledge
只有
to
跟
construct the
周公
most
一样的圣王
appropriate
能够
framework
治理
and
作乐
content for rites and
因为
music.
圣人通过
Because
学
sages
习
were
和
perceived
修
as
身
men
得
of
以
perfect
明心
virtue,
见性，
who had attained innate wisdom through self-cultivation.
他们能
Not only
够
were they
调
able
服
to
内
subdue
心的
desires
欲望
and
和
control
情绪，
emotions,
达
but
到
they had
中
also
和的
found
境界。
peace within their own hearts. Under the
那么
guidance
在
of those
圣人的引
sages,
导下，
it's believed
民
that
心可
people could be
以
led
归
on the
于
path to
良善。
goodness. The sages,
圣人
they
知道人
appreciated the
人
innate
都有
nature of
至
all
善的
men,
本性，
so they
所以他们
introduced
希
the
望
kind of
人
rites and
人都
music
能够
that
明
would
心见
resonate
性。
with the true goodness in human nature.
因
So,
此
by following these
圣人
guidelines,
们遵
people's
循着
conduct
本
and
性的
mindset
明德
could naturally
制作
conform
了
to their
礼
nature,
和乐，
and this could gradually help the innate goodness of men
让
to
人们
surface.
能够遵守
From this,
礼乐制
We
度。
can gather that the essence of rites and music
人
education
们
was to guide
尚且不
people on a
明白
path
本
to
性明德的道
discovering
理
their，
但是如
own
果能够
true
遵
innate
循礼
virtue
乐，
and
也就是
wisdom.
遵循自己的
After
性
the
德
period
行
of
事，
Zhou,
也就能
as
够
each
逐
dynasty
渐
was
的恢复
founded,
本性。
the emperor would
那因
promulgate
此
his
呢，
system of
礼
rites
乐
and
教化
music,
实际上是
either
圣
by
人教化世
modifying on the
人恢
preceding
复性德
system
的善巧
or making
方便。
adjustments according to the
到了
circumstances
后
of the
世，
time.
每一个朝代
Now,
建立后
let's watch
都
a
有天
video
子
on the
颁布
rituals
礼乐制度，
performed
或
at
依据
the
前
annual
朝的礼
Confucius
乐加以
memorial
修改，
ceremony,
或根据
like
时
the
局
Ancestral
增
Remenbrance
补新的
Ceremony.
礼乐。
This service still embraces
那说了
some
那么
of
多，
the
不如我们用
features
一
of
个
the rites
片
and
段来
music
让大家
from
体
ancient
会中
times.
国古代礼仪是如何彰显德行的。
Practicing rituals and propriety can indeed help
落
us
实礼之所
restore
以
our
可以帮
innate
助我们
nature,
恢复本性的
because
纯
it not
善，
only
是因
contains
为
the good
礼
manners
不
and
仅仅包
conduct
括
as shown
包
in
含
the
在这篇
video,
短片中
but
看到
the
的
true
行礼
essence
和
behind
规
the
范呢，
proper
他
conduct
们还
is
蕴
to
藏
foster
着
a sense of
诚
sincerity and
敬
reverence. Sincerity
诚
requires
是
us to
专
stay
一
true
不
to
欺
ourselves and to others, and not be deceitful. Reverence
那么敬
requires us
是
to have
不懈怠
self-discipline
不放
and
荡
to fulfill our duties to the best of our
尽我们的
ability.
本分。
When practicing rites at a ceremony,
我们在
we should focus our
行礼的
mind
时候，
on the
内
service
心一定要专一，
and commemorate
但
our
做事忠
ancestors
诚，没有二心。
wholeheartedly. Confucius suggested that we all live in the 5 relationships. They are father
夫
to
妻
son,
要求我们
ruler
发自
to
内
his
心的履
subject,
行五伦十义，
husband
心
to
中没
wife,
有怨恨和不
elder
平，
sibling to
心甘
younger
情愿地
sibling,
奉侍父
and
母，
friend to friend. So we should
有爱
fulfill
兄长，
our
尊敬
responsibilities
领
of
导，
the 5
不懈怠
relationships
是要
with
求我
good
们
faith,
谨
without
慎
being
认真地
resentful
按照
or
礼的规
reluctant.
范落实执行。
Each of these connecting everybody in one single unit. If all the chains are strong, then the fabric of society would be strong. This was part of Confucius'
那么礼
solution
就是帮助
to
我们
social
落实沉
discord.
静心，没有沉
The
静的礼是
premise
不
of
能够称
harmonious
作礼的，
interpersonal
只能称
relationship
作仪式。
is about
仪式
treating
无
those
法
around
帮助
us
人们达
with
到人
sincerity
际
and
关系的和
reverence.
谐，唯有沉
And
静
that
才能
is
实
also
现
the
和
core
谐。
value of the teaching
中
of
国古代的
rites.
礼分为5种，
Without sincerity and reverence, rites of ritual and prosperity,
祭礼
propriety will lose its
例
true
如
value,
祭祖、祭祀
degenerating
祖
into
先。
pointless and superficial formality. There were 5 types of rituals in ancient China. They were the rituals for ancestral remembrance, funerals,
那么凶礼，
military
例
affairs,
如父母的葬
marriage,
礼。
and welcoming guests.
那军礼
Now,
也就是军事
let's
上
take
的
the
礼，
ancestral
兵礼也
remembrance
就是
service
请
as
兵
an
练客，
example
家
to
礼例如
demonstrate
是
how
婚宴，那
sincerity
么
and
称作
reverence
古
can
礼。
help
那
achieve
么以
the inner
吉礼
peace
为例，
and
我们
harmony
细细
of
谈一
one's
谈
mind.
沉静是如何帮助我们实
According
现
to
内
the
心的和谐。
regulation of ancient rites, in order to express
那
our
么国礼中提
gratitude
到，
to the heavenly beings and
酬
to
谢
our
神灵，
ancestor,
祭祀
in
天地神
preparation
明，
for the
供养祖
service,
先，需要我
we
们
must
做到沉
retain
静
a
庄
pure
严。
mind. In the days
在
before the
祭祀之
service,
前，
participants
参与
were
祭祀的人
required
必
to
须
regulate
斋戒
their
3
mind
天，
by withdrawing their
对内
attention
要
from
调
external
摄内心，
activities,
使内
objects,
心
and
清净，
people that
把
can
心
give
从
pleasure.
外物上收回。
Without the
对
distraction
外
of these
要隔绝
enjoyments,
一切交
it
际
was
娱乐，
more likely to
斋戒的
achieve
时候
inner peace and tranquility.
要
During
追
this time,
思祖先生
participants
前的
were
起
urged
居
to
住所、
recollect
音容
and
笑貌、
reminisce the
饮
contributions
食习
the
惯、
ancestors
志
made,
趣爱好
their
等等。
countenance, routines, and hobbies as if they were still alive. By
那么这
doing
样，
this,
祭祀
it
的
was
先人
hoped
就会重现在
that
自
the
己的
new
心中。
generation would naturally and consciously
那么如
reflect
此沉
upon
静
their
的追
manners
思已过
and
的亲人
conduct,，
想到自
and
己的
from
种种不
which
孝，自
realize
然会
a
升
sense
起
of
惭愧
shame
之心。
for
一
their
个人一
wrongdoings.
旦升起反求诸己
It
的
comes
心，
as no
便不会再
surprise
只看他
that
人
when
的
a
过失，
person begins to
就会
self-reflect,
起到
he
这
or
调
she
和身
will
心、
no longer
化
focus on
解
the faults
冲
of
突的
others.
作用。
This was one of the approaches that the ancestral remembrance ceremony adopted to promote harmony and resolving conflicts.
On the day of the
在祭祀
remembrance
的当天，
service,
进
as the
入宗庙之
participants
后，
enter the ancestral temple
反复
and see
会
the ancestors'
从
names
牌
on the
位上
memorial
看到
tablets,
亲人，
they should show great reverence as if their
在
ancestors
牌位
were
前
present
礼
before
拜
their
之后，
eyes.
行步
After
周旋，
bowing to the memorial
敬奉贡
tablets,
品，
the lead
走出门
attendant
来，
would
心
gently
中
and
肃然。
respectfully walk
那
to the
亲人的
altar
笑容
to、
音
present
容
the
笑
food
貌，好像就
offerings.
在眼前。
The attendants should remain solemn throughout the ceremony
那么
and
出门
keep
之
the
后，侧
ancestors
耳
in
倾
their
听，
mind
仿
at
佛
all
就能够听
times.
到亲人们深
As
深
they
的
leave the
叹息
memorial
声。
hall, they should think that the ancestors
也就是说，在祭祀
whispered
的时
words
候
of，
他
blessings
们
to their
所
ears.
思，一个人就是祭
All
祀
of the
人所思
mentioned
所想、所
was to
听、所
show
看到的，
that during
都
the
是自己
memorial
的先祖。
service, all that one
那先人
thinks,
在世的时候呢，
sees, and
能够恭
hears
敬的
is all
赡养
about our
那
loved
去世之
departed
后
ones.
沉静的祭
When we
祀
think，about it,
念念都在
when our
追
elders were
念
around,
先人。
we showed respect and looked
待人
after
处
them.
事便不会
It
轻
should be no
率，生
different
怕辱
after
没了
they've
先
passed
人
away.
的声名。
They shall be dearly missed and
那
remembered
里长
always.
养人们的
This
沉
is
静
also
之
a
心，
means to
沉静
practice
之
filial
心自然
piety.
而然的
When we are
约束
mindful
了
of the
人们的
reputation of
言
our
语
elders
行
and
为，维
ancestors,
护着
we
人际
become
关
better
系的和
self-disciplined
谐。
and more observant of our manners and conduct. In this way, the teaching of rites can cultivate the virtues and sincerity and reverence in men. And such attributes would help us to develop a self-restraint for one's thoughts, words, and actions, which is conducive to maintaining the harmony of various relationships within the society.
In addition to these rituals, The most
那在祭祀
important
的过程
part
之
of
中
the
呢，除
service
了
is to speak
要
about
行
the
这些礼
virtues
仪之
of the
外，那最重
ancestors,
要的还是
so
要
that
讲
the
述
future
祖先
generation
的德
can
行
look up to
那
them,
念念不
follow
忘
in their
祖先
footsteps,
对国家
and
民族的
remember
贡
the
献。
contributions the ancestors had made for their countries and for humanity. Through the combination of rituals
那这样
and music,
一
the
来，
ancestral
祭
remembrance
祀
service
才能
displays
够
one's
显示
filial
出
sentiments,
诚信之心、
respect,
思
and
慕之心。
solemnity, which is truly inspiring and moving to me. So
我
when
感
it
到
comes to
非
the
常的
reason
感
why
动。
ancient Chinese rites can harmonize our minds, I think it's because
那
rites
戏服
can
大
evoke
典
a
通
sense
过
of
礼仪音
sincerity
乐的配
in
合所
people,
表现出来的
and
恭
based
敬
on
肃
that,
穆，确实让
benevolence
人肃
and
然起敬。
righteousness
那这
can
种
be
气氛就
developed.
让人感觉到与众不
In the
同。
growing
所以中
in
国古代的
sincerity
礼
and
之所以能够
respect,
和谐
it
人心
prompts and encourages
在于
men
它
to fulfill
长
their
养了人们
duties
心
in the
中的
five
诚信，
relationships.
进而长养了
This is
人们
another
的善良
important
的道
role
义。
that the teaching of rites play, as it helps to maintain
诚信之
moral
心的增
and
长，
ethics
促进我们在
in
五伦关系
society.
中尽心尽力落
Ancient
实自己
sages
的本
believed
分。
that
那这
all
也
things
是礼
were
外
created
在
by
的
the
作用，
nature.
维
With
持
its
着
vigorous
伦理道德的
vitality,
秩序。古代的圣人们认为，
Nature nurtures everything on
自
earth.
然创
The
造了万
nature
物，
has its own
以自
cycle.
己旺盛
It
的
moves
生
from
命
one
力
phase
养
to
育了
another
万物。
and repeats.
那么这种
There are 4
创
seasons
造
in a
包
year.
含着既定
Spring
的
is
和
a time
谐
for
和
rebirth
秩
and
序。
new beginnings.
天
Summer
地万物
is
都
for
有自己的秩
development
序。
and growth.
那么一年有4个季
Autumn
节，
is a season of
春天
harvest,
主
the time to
生发，
gather nature's
夏
bounty,
天主成长，
and winter
那
is
秋
a
天
time
是
for
收获，
collection
冬
and
天呢
comfort.
它是收
As we can imagine,
储藏。
if the
那
order
么
of the
四季
4
的运行
seasons
如
were
果紊乱
misplaced,
了，万物都
all
无
living things
法
will struggle
生
to
活。
survive.
那天
Nature
道
has its own
是一
rules
种
and
自然而
order.
然的
The
道
same
理
principle
规则。
applies to
那
our
同样的伦理
society.
道德也是一
The
种
absence
自
of
然而
morals
然
and
的
ethics
道理
is
规则。
undeniably one of the driving force behind the cause of today's social unrest.
The propriety of ancient China followed the requirements of 5
那么
relationships
中国
and
古
the
代的
10
礼
virtues.
遵循着五
The
伦
5
十义。
relationships,
五
as
伦
mentioned
就是
earlier,
实际上
refers
是社
to
会
the
上
5
最基
basic
本的
interpersonal
5种
relationships.
伦理关系。
The 10 virtues
那父
include
子有
the
亲，
love of parents and the
君臣
filial
有义，
duty
夫
of
妇有义
children,
长幼有
the
序，朋友有
kindness
信。
of an
那么
elder
十义
brother,
呢，包括
and the
父
fi-
子、
and the
子孝、
respect from
兄
the
良、
younger
弟
siblings,
悌、夫义、
the different
父
position
亲、
and
长
duties
惠、
of
幼顺、
husband and
军
wife,
人、
the
臣
gentleness
忠
of
的道理。
elders and obedience of juniors, the benevolence of the ruler and the faithfulness of his subordinates. The ancient sages did not propose the 5 relationships and the 10 virtues
那么古
to
圣先贤
constrain
他
the
并不
minds
是
of
自己
people.
创造的这个
They are
五伦
rather
十
the
义，
qualities
它其
of
实
our
是
essential
我
nature.
们本性中
The
性格中
practice
本
of
有的东西。
propriety helps to bring
那么
out the
礼要求
true
我们在
goodness in
五伦
man.
关系之中落实
The
这些德
ethical
行，
relationships
那正
between the
是帮
ruler
助我
and
们
his
恢复本
subordinates,
性的至
the
善。
parents and their children, as
君
well as
臣父
between
子、夫
husbands
妇
and
等的伦理
wives,
关系，
are
那
not
并非是
maintained
等级
in a
压
way
迫，
of
而
suppression.
是使社
To
会
the
关系
contrary,
充满有
The
秩序，
responsibilities
能够
and
走向
contributions of
和
each
谐。
party
那有
are
社会有秩序，
appreciated,
才容易达
valued,
到和谐。
and
那么
respected.
如果没有秩序，
The
就
purpose
会
of
发
following
生
the 5
混乱。
relationships and the 10 virtues was to maintain social order so that people in different positions can collaborate to achieve a harmonious social atmosphere. Good social order is the precondition for achieving harmony. Disorder will undoubtedly lead to chaos and conflicts.
Let's take the relationship between the ruler and his
那我们
subordinates
来
as
看一
an
看这个
example.
君臣关系啊，以这
Without
为
the
例，那
constraints
君
given
臣之
by
间如果缺少了
propriety,
礼的约
problems
束，
such as
就会
inefficient
产生
teamwork
政令不达、
or a lack of respect
团
between
队
people
效
may
率低
occur.
下的这些问题。
Looking back in history, when Han
那么
Dynasty
在
was
汉
founded,
朝
there
刚
was
刚
not
建立初
yet
期
a
啊，国
well-instituted
家的
system
礼
of
制
rites
都
and
没有确
music.
定。那很多的大
Some
臣
of
呢，
the
因为出
appointed
身
ministers
草 草莽，
came from
没
no
有受过
scholarly
礼的教
background,
育， 那
and
有时候
never
喝
had
醉
the
了酒，
opportunity
就在皇
to
帝面前
receive the
争功，
teachings
甚
of
至大
rites.
喊大叫、拔
It was
剑，
stated
破
in
坏了这
recorded
个
history
宫殿的建筑。
that they'd
那
sometimes
这
see
就
the
不仅使
emperor
皇帝
even
的
when they
威
were
严
drunk,
扫地了，
boasting
那
about
因
their
为官
achievements
员
and
之间的这个
contributions.
凝聚力啊，
They
那
would
也
shout
大
at the
打折
emperor
扣了。
and even using their sword to break the things in the palace. This not only brought humiliation to the emperor, but also greatly reduced the cohesiveness among the officials. In view of this
那么
situation,
于是呢，
the
这
official
个
and rights specialist
苏
Shu
孙
Sentong
苏孙
advised
通
Emperor
就
Gaozu
建议
that a
汉高祖
comprehensive
制
system
定
of rites and
礼仪制
music
度，
was needed
啊
immediately.
并在这个整
This
个朝
system
廷加以推
was
行
then。introduced and implemented in the imperial court. Soon after,
那
the
么
officials
以
and the
正
ministers
军
learned about the
就是
proper rites
用来
and they
正
dutifully
君臣
followed,
之位了。
practiced. They had since never
那么经
acted
过这一段时间的这
disrespectfully
个操
towards
练
the
呢，这些
emperor.
王公大臣都学
Emperor
会了朝
Gaozu was
堂的
certainly
这个礼
delighted,
节哈
and。he was
那
finally
再不
treated
像那以
with the
前那样的
dignity
松
and
散
respect
邋
a
遢
ruler
了
deserves.
啊。那汉
From
高
this
祖
we can
他
gather,
非常的高兴啊，
if
他
the
就赞
system
叹
of
说
rights is not promulgated
那我
within
今
the
天才知道
government,
当
the
天子的尊
subordinates
贵啊
may。not respect their ruler, and as a result, the emperor's policies and interests
那
cannot be well
这就
carried
说
out.
明
According to the Chinese ancestors, the
朝
virtue
廷
of
班次的
sincerity
这
and
个
reverence
整
is
肃
the
治理国
root
家如果
of
没有
all
礼，那
virtues.
臣子就会懈
The
怠。
venerable
那
Master
做
Qin Kong
皇
told
帝也没有
us,
威严，没有威
For
严，
those
他
who
说话大臣就
misunderstand,
不会当一回
defame
事，
or
那正面也就
persecute
很难
me,
实行，没有
I
执行力。
choose to give them my respect. I take their insults
中国的老
with
祖
a
宗说，
patient
沉
and
静是
peaceful
成就一切
mind.
德行的根本，
The real
万德
solution
之本啊。
to end
善
all
尽
the
下供养法师，
problems
有师傅善人他就说了，
is
对于
when
误
we turn
会、
our
诽谤、
enemies
陷害我的
into
人，
friends,
我真诚恭敬
turn
拜之。
resentment
误
into
会就能
friendship.
化解，诽谤
We
也
should
能消
keep
除，
away
陷
even the
害也会
slightest
终止，
thought
化敌
of
为友，
anger
化
and
怨为亲，
retaliation.
这是真正解决问题。
Revenge
决
would
定
only bring
不能有
misery,
丝毫怨
pain,
恨
and
心、
escalate
报复心，
conflicts.
或是心
We
存
live in
怨
a
恨
time
报
of
复，
turmoil,
冤冤相报，
and
苦
most of
不
us
堪言。
are in a state of
要
mental
懂得
and
化解
physical
怨结。
insecurity.
现在社会动乱
If we，
大家
aspire
都身
for
心不
social
安稳。
harmony,
要化解
first,
怨
we must
对
find
那么
peace
从哪
within
里
our
化解
own
呢？
hearts
要从自己
by
心里化
reflecting
解，
on our
把内
thoughts,
心所有的一切
words,
矛盾、
and
冲
deeds
突、
and
是非、
resolving
人
any
我
internal
化解。
conflict first.
外面才是一
From the
片
Confucian
和谐
point of view,
天下太
when
平。
the order of the 5 relationships
那
is
么五伦关
achieved,
系不乱，
then there will be harmony
有秩序，
in the
家族
home.
才能够和合。
If there is
那家
harmony in
族
the home,
和谐了，
there will be
国
order
家
in
才
the
能够太
nations.
平。
When there is order
那
in the
国家太
nations,
平，
world
世
peace can be
界
achieved.
就能够得以和谐。
Overall,
因此
building a
呢，
harmonious
世界
world
和谐
begins
从
with our
我心
mind.
做起。
Indeed.
的确
Before we
如
move
此。
on to music education, we'd like to show you a snippet of the opening ceremony at the first Sinology Cultural Festival held at the Imperial College in Beijing.
那么待会
This
儿我跟
clip
大家看一
shows
个视
some of the
频，
rituals
可
from
能
ancient
是
times.
在
Now,
那
let's
我们现
explore
在
the significance of
一
music
起来看一
education.
下这个
As we
乐
know,
教育的乐
music
教
has
的
been
意
part
义。
of our lives for thousands of years. No matter of our
在人
background,
类生活中已
it
经
is the
有
common
几
language
千
shared
年
by
的历
all.
史了。
Music
那
really
这个
has a
乐的话，
charm
跨
to
越所有的
intensify
语言
and，bring life to fulfillment in rich and meaningful ways.
它把将
In
生活
ancient
变得更加
China,
丰富。
music
更加有意义。
education was an
那
integral
么在
part
中
of
国
the
呢，
social
这个
fabric,
乐的教育
so
是
it was
一个
held
非常
with the
非常重要
utmost
的部分。
regard. Inspired by the Duke of Zhou, who had
那
apparently
周公
constructed rites and created music during the Zhou
治理
dynasty,
作乐，
the
然后给
enforcement
乐的
of
话做了一系列
music
的制度。
education was advocated in the teachings of Confucius.
那么在
As
儒
music
家的
was of
教育
primary
当中呢，
importance
乐
to
也
the
是一个
Zhou
非常重要的
educational
部分。
practice, it also influenced Confucius' theory of
甚至这个乐的教育
self-cultivation.
甚至也影响到了这
Confucius,
个
who
孔
lived
老夫子
25
教育的理
centuries
念。
ago, is widely
那么
recognized
2500多
as
年
one of the
前，
most
孔老夫子的教
influential
育
Chinese philosophers and thinkers.
影
But
响了
little did we know that he was
中国的
also
哲
a
学。
great master of music education. His most famous saying on music education
那
might be
孔老
this
夫子
one:
对于
To
乐最重
educate
要的这
somebody,
个
you should
一句
start
话
from
是
poems, emphasize on rites, and finish on music.
重理
Confucius always taught the
重
six
于
arts.
理，
Do you know what they are,
忠于
Bohan?
乐
Yes,
就是最后以
The
乐
six
来结
arts
束。
are rites,
那
music,
么第一个是礼仪，
archery, chariot
就是这个
racing,
六艺啊，是
calligraphy,
礼
and
乐
mathematics. They were considered the most crucial knowledge and skills in ancient China. As we can see,
还
music
有
was
书
only second
数
to rites, showing that Confucius
那么
had
从
put
这个
music
列
education
这个列
in a
单上可以看
position
得出来，
with great
这个
importance.
音乐的话是
Then
列在第
there is
二
a
位，说
question
明这
of
个音乐的
what is
重要
good
性。
music. Confucius believed that good music should have both a good connotation
那
and
么孔老夫
sensible
子认
artistic
为，
value.
好的音乐它
He
必须要
stressed
有好的
that
内
music
容
without
和
good
它的
connotation
好的旋
should be
律。
excluded from his curriculum. While it is difficult to give a definition for absolute beautiful music, as seen in the Analects, Confucius illustrated that a piece of music was beautiful if it had a stunning beginning, if it was
那
harmonic,
如果这个音乐
clear,
是好的音
and
乐，孔老夫
smoothly
子的
continuous.
标准啊是
At
它
the time,
必须要有
music
一
with
个
these
好的
properties was
开
chosen
始
to be taught to students.
呃
Confucius's
旋
aesthetic
律
standard
优
for
美
music continues to influence China today.
声
As
音和
mentioned
谐
earlier,
清晰
Confucius attached to
流畅
music as a means of self-cultivation. 乐记
那么
is the first
音乐
complete
也是作为
treatise
修
on
身
music
的
in recorded
一个
Chinese
方式
history, written
一个
around
手
the
段
1st and 2nd centuries. 荀子, the author of 乐记, is a renowned
乐记的作者
Confucian
作者
philosopher
荀
who
子
lived during
写
the
道
Warring States period. He argued that
他
a
说
man of good virtue
一
should
个
use music
君
to
子
carry out his teachings and lead people on the path of virtue.
是以乐
It was
教人
emphasized that rites and music should not be neglected for a moment by anyone.
那么
When
乐
a person
在
has
任何时
mastered
刻
the
都不应该
principles
被
of
人忽视
music and regulated his heart and mind
乐
accordingly,
可以用来
the
调
proper,
和人心，
gentle, and honest
让
heart
人
is naturally
人心
developed.
柔和，
And with this development of the heart
那
comes joy.
人心得以柔
This
和之
joy
后呢，
persists
那
to a feeling of
就会
repose.
得到快乐。
Confucius himself followed this teaching faithfully.
孔
As a
孔老夫
music
子他自己
teacher,
也
he composed
遵循
music
着这么
for
一
all
个
the
理念教育
305
的理念
poems in the Book of Poetry,
那他
which
在
is
他
the
人就在
first
诗经
poem
里面
collection
说，
in the history of
哎
China.
就是
The very early teachings of ancient sages and kings were known to
那
have
么
been
古圣先
recorded
贤
in the books of
古代的圣
poetry,
王
history,
他们要
rites,
读
and music,
就是
where
四
the book
经
of poetry
诗经
describes aims,
书
the book of pardon me, the book of poetry describes aims, the book of history describes events, the rites direct conduct, and the book of music secures harmony.
Music can bring joy, an emotion that humans would naturally respond to. This is the process of moving music from external phenomenon to an internal affective trait. When we feel joy, we tend to seek an outlet in voice and expression in movement.
我们通常
荀子 once said,
寻找快乐的音
Man
乐，然
cannot
后
be
跟之
without joy,
手舞足
and
蹈。
when there is joy, it must have a physical embodiment. When this
荀子可以
embodiment
说，
does not conform to
当一
the
个
right
人
principles,
感到愉悦
there
的
is
时候，
believed to be disorder.
As the early kings in
他的
China
身
much
体会
hoped
随
to
之
avoid disorder,
手舞足蹈。
so they established the music of the ya and song
那
to
另外
guide
一
their
个乐
kingdom
呢
and
是
people.
雅和颂
The
这个
music
音
of
乐
ya
的
and song
两
are
个
two of the three divisions that constitute the book of
特性。
poetry. This genre of music was written to be joyful and not degenerate, so as to
那么
awaken and inspire the goodness in men and to prevent
这个音
any
乐的
evil feelings from
题
developing.
材啊，
This is the manner
是
in
用
which the
来
early kings established music.
表达
So it is fair to
喜
say
悦。
that music functioned as an instrument for moral
那此外，
education. This has
音乐
also
也
been the
用来
prevailing Confucianist
德育。
view of music.
The Calling of the Deers is a poem from the Ya
鹿
division
鸣
of the Book
诗
of
经当中呢有
Poetry.
一首诗叫鹿
It
鸣，
was written to describe the hospitality towards
就
guests,
是用来描
and music
述
was composed for this poem.
客人
Now,
的
let's enjoy this
欢迎。
this piece played on the guqin, a seven-string musical instrument of the zither
在
family.
吟诵这首诗这个诗歌的时候呢，会要用古琴来配乐。
家贫是
As we just heard,
那我们刚刚听到
music
了这一
evokes
首
similar
诗
feelings
性的
and
这个诗歌
responses in us due to the sense of shared symbolism it intends to propose.
那这个
荀
音乐
子
当中呢，
thought
它
that music
用
springs from the movement of the mind. In fact,
音乐
all the
帮助我们
modulations
的
of the
内
voice
心
arise from the mind,
调
and the
节
various affections of the
得到协
mind, as
调
we're aware, are produced by the phenomena external to it. So we can conclude that the
所以我们可以归
affections
纳呢
produced are manifested in the sounds. Yue
人
Ji
的情绪
stated
这种
there
心
are
爱之
6
情可以
distinctiveness
用
of
音乐
sound
来表达
that are not from
那么
one's innate nature.
就有几种
Rather, they indicate the impressions produced by external phenomena.
Let's take a closer look at them.
乐器
When
里
the
面有
mind
记
is moved to sorrow,
呃
the sound uttered is
那么
sharp
他说呢
and diminishing.
当这个
When
人
it's
的
moved to pleasure, the sound
人心
is
是很
slow
喜悦的时
and
候
gentle.
那他这个
When
音
moved to
乐
joy,
就
the sound is exclamatory
非常的
and soon disappears. When
活跃
anger emerges,
那如果当人
the
很
sound becomes coarse and
生气的
fierce.
时候，那我们的
When
声
the
音就
mind
变得
is
非常
moved
的
to reverence, the sound is straightforward with an indication of humility. When it's moved to love,
那
the
当
sound is harmonious
要
and
表
soft.
现音乐来
So
表
on
现
this
爱的时候
account,
呢，
The
这
ancient
个
kings
音乐就
were
变得
watchful
听
of
起
the
来非常
things
的和
by
谐
which the
和
mind
柔
was
和。
affected. So they introduced the rites to correctly direct man's aim,
所以
and music to give harmony.
Of course, there's
周
indeed
公
no
诸
end
周
of
公
the
的这些
things
古
by
圣先
which
贤
man
他
is
们用这
affected.
个
And when our likings
治
and
理作乐
dislikings
的时
are
候，它
not
这些乐
bound
的
by
制
the
度就是用
regulation from
这一
within,
些
we can be changed
规
into
律
the nature of
来
things
制定
as they come
音乐
before
的
us.
制度。
The ancient kings were well aware of this, so they'd
古代圣
taken
王
the
他们
requirements
对
of
这一
humanity
些
into
音乐的特性
consideration
非常的清楚，而
when
且
they
对音乐
instituted
对人们的
their rites
影响
and
也非常的
music.
清楚。那所以
The
他
ultimate
用这一
purpose
些
of using the
根据这些特
instruments
性
of
来
rites and music
作曲。
is really to assimilate the minds of people in the hope to achieve good order within the government and to elevate
那么
social
通过治
atmosphere.
理作乐，
Music has the power
制
to
作这
improve
个乐
society
的
as it
制
brings
度
people
来达
together.
到
As Xunzi particularly noted
之间的
that
就是政府与官
music,
员
when
之间的这
music
个
is
和谐。
performed in the ancestral temple of the king and his ministers, the superiors and the people listen to it together.
那么
All
在
who
宗
are
庙
present
祭祀
will
的
be
时候呢
filled with a
帝
spirit
王
of
和
harmonious
这些
reverence.
臣子一
Similarly,
起来
when
聆
music
听
is performed
和
within
谐
the
之乐。
household, everyone present will be filled with a spirit of harmonious
那么
kinship.
所有聆听这
And
种
when
音乐的
performed
人
in
呢
the community,
身心都能到
all
能够
will
得
be
到和
filled
谐。
with a spirit of harmonious concord. Consequently, music brings about unity.
音乐
So
带来
clearly,
的是
Xunzi did not view
一体
music
带来的
as
是
a
和谐
personal undertaking, but rather a communal event that induces social harmony. As we know,
那么音
the
乐同时也能
realization
带
of
来社会的
harmony
和
is
谐。
celebrated in the Confucian texts
那如果
as the
和
highest
谐
cultural achievement,
在这个儒家
and
的这
music
么一个
played a
情
significant
形
role
当中
in the
来
accomplishment
庆祝
of
的
this
话，
goal. Because music had the
就是
capacity
用音乐
to
来表
reach
现。
out to all facets of society, from the ancestral temples of the kings to households and communities.
那么
So
所
the
以说
crux
这个
of
音
music
乐对人
education
的
in
影响
ancient
就
China
从
was to
帝王的
transform
宗庙
people
一直到
through the
这
joy
个
of music
臣子，
so
然
as
后
to
再到平
create
民百
an
姓，都
ordered
是非常的重
society.
要。
Next,
那么接
let's
下来
hear
我们
from
来
some of the
听一
earliest
听
ancient Chinese musical
这个
instruments.
中国
In
最
this
古老
melody,
的乐
you will hear
器。
the sounds of the guqin,
我们先来听古
the sheng,
琴
which
声
is a wind instrument, the bianzhong,
还有编
the
钟。
ancient Chinese chime bells, and the se, an ancient string instrument. Enjoy.
大家一起来听一下。
slightly different note, Bohan. Did you know that music has also been a type of therapy in Chinese medicine?
Yes, I understand that it's been proven to be quite effective.
It all begins with the 5 elements. Has it ever occurred to you that 5 is no ordinary number in Chinese culture?
From ancient times, the Chinese had always believed that the 5 elements, metal, wood, water, fire, and earth, make up everything under the heaven. Indeed, if we look at things in nature, we can see that most things really are different combinations of just these 5 things.
Then it may not be a coincidence that the human body also seems to follow the number 5. We have 5 fingers on each hand. We also have the 5 senses: sight, smell, taste, touch, and hearing. So 5 sensory organs too: eyes, nose, tongue, skin, and ears. According to the Chinese medicine, human beings have 5 major internal organ systems: the heart, liver, lungs, kidneys, and spleen. And each of these corresponds to one of the 5 elements.
Music is known to be effective in soothing our nerves and guide the mind and body back to a state of harmony. Chinese doctors since ancient times believed they could heal people with music because the frequency of the notes can harmonize the 5 elements inside the body. It should come as no surprise that Chinese music is also a 5-tone system known as the pentatonic scale. The 5 tones are classified as gong, shang, jue, zhi, yu.
These simple 5 Chinese tones are quite powerful because they are known to each correspond to the 5 internal organs and can regulate them. The health benefits, to name a few, include increasing metabolism, opening thought processes, and regulating the heart. As one person's internal organs are different from someone else's, so music can touch people in many different ways. By adding what is lacking and reducing what is in excess, we can restore balance to the mind and body.
Now, let's explore each of the 5 tones in more detail. The gong-based melodies are classified as noble, earth-related, and can affect the spleen. Often listening to such music makes one tolerant and kind.
Next, we have shang. Shang melodies are heavy, like the unbending metal. This music affects the lungs, and frequent listening makes one righteous and friendly. Jue-based music portrays the arrival of spring, awakening all life anew, and this relates to wood. This kind of music affects the liver, and listening to it makes one kind-hearted and serene.
Zhi-based music is passionate and lively like fire. It affects the heart. Listening to it makes one generous. Yu-based tunes are melancholy, like the calmly running water. They affect the kidneys. Listening to these tunes can make one mentally balanced and gentle. But no matter which emotions the music expresses, it can harm the body and the flow of qi energy once taken to the extreme. So it's best to approach everything in moderation.
That's true. Yueji also illustrated a correlation between the words and sound of people in relation to the pentatonic scale and the character of their government. Interestingly enough, the note gong represents the ruler, shang, the ministers, jue, the people, zhi, affairs, and yu, public resources. If there is no disorder or irregularity in these 5 notes, there will be no urge for peace and harmony in the state.
代表的是这
If
个
gong is
事国家的
irregular,
事物，
then the
然后
sound appears to
云
be
呢代表
wild
的
and
是
broken. As a
公众
result,
资源。
it's believed that the ruler of the state is haughty and self-centered. If shang is
那么
irregular,
呢，
the
因为
sound
弓
is
是
jerky, and the
这个
officers
调
of the
子它
state
是
are
不
decayed.
太规则的，所以
If
说
jue
这
is
个
irregular,
这个弓
the
的
sound
这个
would
声音
show
呢，它
anxiety,
听起来
meaning
有
the
点
people
黄
are
有点
dissatisfied.
一段段的，
If
就是
zhi
没
is
有延
irregular,
续性。那么
the
因此
sound
呢，
expresses sorrow that affairs could be strained. If yu
这个
is irregular,
领
the
导
sound is expressive of impending ruin, implying that the resources of the state are exhausted.
If the 5 notes are all irregular and interfere with one
那
another,
如果说
then
这
this
5
indicates
个
a
调子
state
的话，
of
它
insolent
都
disorder.
它没有规律，就
And
是
the
不和
state
谐
could
了。
be at no
然
distant
后
day
不是
to
说
face extinction or
和谐
ruin.
的跟其他的
Historical
4个调子
records
相互之
show
间
that the
相
sounds
演
of the
奏，
states
那么呢就
Zheng
会
and Wei
带来
showed
混
signs
乱。
of such abandoned condition. The government of Wei was in a state of dissipation. The people were unsettled, defaming their superiors and pursuing their private aims beyond the possibility of restraint.
乐记 recorded a statement by Zixia, who was a prominent disciple
子
of
夏在乐
Confucius.
记当中有一个
He pointed out that the sound and
说了这么一
music
句话，
of
那
Zheng were going to a wild excess and would corrupt the mind. Those of
他
Song
说
told of slothful indulgence,
郑国的
so
这
would
个
drown
音
the
乐
mind. Those of Wei were overly passionate and rapid, so could
郑国的
perplex
音
the
乐
mind.
呢，带
And
给
those
人一
of
种
Qi
这个
were
疯狂
violent
的
and depraved,
这一个
so they
状
make the
态
mind arrogant.
会
The sound of those 4 states all
让
stimulated
人的这个身
avaricious
心
desire
失去
and were
和谐。
adverse to virtue.
Interestingly enough, in the
那
West, some music
很
were
有趣
also
的是
not
呢，在
greatly encouraged.
西方
The
有一
singing
些
of
音乐
certain note intervals called
也是
tritones
不
were
被
banned
这
during the
个
Middle
大众
Ages.
所
Also in
喜欢
ancient
的
times, Greek
不被
warriors
这个
were
政府所
encouraged
鼓励的。
to only listen to music from brass
那
instrument
例如说，
and at the same time
希腊的这
forbidden
一些
from listening to
战
those
士
played
士
on the
兵啊
lyre.
他们一般
This
这
was
个
owing to the fact
将领
that
会让他
string
们去
music
听一些
was considered too sentimental,
管弦乐器，
and it was speculated
那
that
么
it
不
would
让他们
induce
去听
melancholia into the psyche of
这
the
个
warriors.
Generally
例如这
speaking,
个
in the Confucian
竖
tradition,
琴啊那一类的
music
音乐
education is interpreted as the pinnacle of one's education, where one perfects oneself, rather than
那
just
么
a
总体
hobby
说来啊，
meant to be
在
pursued
儒家
when
的传
young,
统
only to be abandoned later.
来说，这个
Confucius
音乐
told his
教育呢
students to be
它是
stimulated by
一个人
poetry,
教育的
to take their
核心
stand on
之一
rights, and be perfected by
或者
music.
说是顶峰
In
了。
our society today, music more so
那么
act
因为
as a
一个人的
motivator
教育，它
and
达到了这
relaxant
个
in our
巅峰
daily
的话，
lives.
它这个
It
音
may be
乐
sometimes
一定
joyful
是
and
其
peaceful,
中的一个重
serene
要的
with
一部分。
positive energy. At other times, it may be brooding, dark, or even malevolent. It is no question that music is one of the greatest gifts that humanity has brought to this world. When used correctly, it can be motivational and uplifting. But in the wrong hands,
那如果音
it
乐
can have
它
the
使用
complete
正确的话，
undesirable
它能够
outcome.
给人带来快乐，
It's a matter of
给
our
人带来
choice
正能量。
to
那
do
如果
what's
说
good for
它
ourselves
这
and
个
for
使
social
用
harmony.
错误，
So
那
Ming
给
Yan,
人带来
how
的
would you
是负面
compare
能量
music
破坏
education
和
with the
谐。
teachings of rights?
Well, I think from a Confucian perspective,
那从这个儒
music
家的角度来
balances
讲，
rights so that humans do not become rigid
礼
moralists.
能够给
They seem to be
乐能够给
opposites
礼带来
that
平
complement
衡
each other. While music is joy, right is solemnity.
那
While
当
music
音乐
regulates
是
emotions,
喜悦的音乐
right
的时候，那
regulates
这个礼
conduct.
它是
While
非
music
常
is
的
in
宁
motion,
静。
right
宁
is
和
static. So on the whole, music
那所以
comes
说
from within, and
音乐
right
来自内
comes from
心。
without.
I
然后
agree. The teachings of rights and music are equally important. It is human nature that when the heart is absent from the feeling of harmony and joy, even for just a moment, meanness and deceitfulness could fill in the gaps. If the outward demeanor is for a moment without respectfulness, indifference and rudeness can show themselves. As the Chinese saying goes, when one's inner man is harmonious, his outer man will appear docile. The ideal result of music is perfect harmony, and that of rites is perfect observance of propriety.
Confucius once said that governors would do well to rule their people through rites for the purpose of developing an awareness of self-discipline, so the need for harsh laws and policing would be mitigated. And music, with its unspoken feeling and depth, could be used to teach and reinforce the rights among the people. It was also considered crucial for the governors to set good examples for their people. When virtue shines and acts within them, when the principles of propriety are displayed in their conduct, the people would naturally accept the rules and follow in the footsteps of their superiors. Hence, it's stated in 乐记, carry out perfectly rites and music, and give them their outward manifestation and application, and under the heaven, nothing difficult to manage will appear.
After learning about the profound meaning behind the education of rites and music and its importance in the ancient society, I now understand why the ancestral remembrance service has always given me a sense of solemnity and reverence.
That's right, Bohan. The true meaning and purpose of rites and music was to lay the bricks for the attainment of peace and harmony. The classic of history, 尚书, was one of the earliest classics to raise the idea of world peace. 尚书 was one of the 5 classics of ancient Chinese literature.
Most people detest war and desire peace. A nation should first strive for internal stability before pursuing economic growth. The essence of traditional Chinese culture is embodied in the concept of harmony. As we know, religious education in the West promotes the same idea. We all want peace and happiness for the world and for our children.
The education of rites and music was highly regarded in ancient China, as it played a significant role in raising the awareness of harmony in individuals, with its ripple effect to influence the whole of society. It's time that we turn to the wisdom of our ancestors to learn from their experiences and the lessons of history. As citizens of the world, we all share the common mission and responsibility of building peace and harmony. The future of the world lies in our hands, and world peace begins with you and me. Please allow us to conclude our session with a song about the traditional values of rites. We thank you for your time, and we hope that the ancestral remembrance ceremony held this afternoon would be an unforgettable and inspiring experience for you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
谢谢。
花儿脸上开，一丛小